Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk about IRL, and I want to talk about specifically recognizing in IRL when the die is rolled. Okay, so we have this incredibly transform. Dungeons and Dragons has created the most powerful narrative engine that's ever been built. Before Gary Gygax in 1974, uh, stuck up, like overeducated authors wrote a bunch of stuff on a page, and then you, the reader, was supposed to just sit there and read it, and you had no control of the story. You had nothing could shift. The author was uninterrupted by anyone except their editor at the end of the process. When they were writing stuff, they could write whatever they wanted. It's just really, really bad storytelling method, right? Like, it's just antiquated, no longer needed very much. And Gary came in and said, "Hey, the artist is the dungeon master. Every single experiencer, what used to be the reader, right, of this story can change the story. They can interrupt the dungeon master in the middle of a sentence and change the direction of the story immediately. The dungeon master is like, "Hey, you guys are going to slay the dragon," and the player can be like, "No, when we heard about that goblin warren 20 miles to the south, we're not going to let those those villagers just have to deal with that problem on their own. We're going to go help them," right? And the dungeon master, with no notes for that, no ability to is expected to change the story in real time. They do it it happens 1,000 times on every Sunday, right? And it's incredible. And we are now telling the most important stories in the world because they're so small, they're so intimate, they're so personal, they can actually help people. And that's exactly what D&D is doing. It's forging a new form of human, a human who can run real life models of anything they want to learn about within Dungeons and Dragons. And it's incredible, and it's just transformative. It is really transformative. But so you have the dungeon master, the artist, right? The primary artist. You have the D&D players. They're coming in as experiencers, and they can change the story in mid-flight. And both of them are interrupted by the math rocks, the polyhedral dice. And so the players say, "Hey, I'm gonna go. We're gonna go into, we're gonna go help those people in the Goblin Warren, right?" But then they come across a pit trap, right? That's just set out in the forest. They fall into it. One of them gets spikes through their, through their jumblies, and oh no, somebody's gonna die. And now you're headed off to the Hedge Witch, right? Whoa, hey, what happened? Why are we going to the Hedge Witch now? What are we encounter on the way to the Hedge Witch who can cure this one person who fell in, one of our player characters who fell in a spike trap, right? And the dungeon master didn't plan this, and the players didn't plan this, right? They didn't want to go be searching out a Hedge Witch at 3 a.m. in the middle of Neverwinter Forest, right? But that's what they're doing now because they need healative balms to because there were poisons on the spikes in the pit trap, and the person's gonna die soon, right? The player character, right? The dice has been rolled. Now, that was a bad example of the dice being rolled. That was an example of something bad happening with the dice. What I want to talk about right now is realizing in your own life when the dice are rolled, right? So recently, I planned a trip. A buddy of mine was like, "Hey, let's go to the Renaissance Fair," right? And I was like, "Hey, I haven't been to a Renaissance Fair in 5 years. Let's go, man. Maybe 10, right?" I was like, "That's awesome, right?" So that next Saturday, I head out. I head out at 11 a.m. I'm going to be there, at like noon, right? And I'm halfway there. It's about an hour and a half drive. I'll be there at 12:30, right? It's a 90-minute drive, right? So I'm halfway there, and my buddy calls me and goes, "Oh my gosh, the Renaissance Fair sold out," right? We're running late, and we looked at him and one other person who was going, "Hey, it's sold out, man. We can't go." And I was like, "Whoa," So now I'm like, 50. I'm like 50 miles away from my house, right? And I'm headed to somewhere I can't go because I can't get in, right? So, I live in Pennsylvania and in one section, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. I've never been here," right? So I just took my phone and was like, cool stuff near me. And I found the Medal of Honor Grove, and I spent the day in a grove which highly reminded me of the Magic the Gathering Dungeons and Dragons card, you come upon a glade, right? It was like literally like I came upon a glade, in my, but I ended up spending an entire amazing, wonderful, and I also went to Reed and Company, the fantastic bookstore in the middle of, and I ate at an amazing pizza place, right? So I ate at a place I didn't know exist. I sat and I read and I prayed and I just had a wonderful time in this grove that I had never even knew existed. And then at the end of the day, I spent, literally like 2 hours just looking through books and bought an incredible book at Reed and Company. I bought The Secret Lives of Color, which I'm using to transform how I use palettes in my Dungeons and Dragons game. But that book is not a Dungeons and Dragons book, right? It's just a book about human experience, which perfectly connects to Dungeons and Dragons, right? And so the die was rolled. I had made my plans, right? But the die was rolled. The die was rolled. And as Dungeon Masters, as Dungeons and Dragons players, we need to realize when the die is rolled in life, right? Buddy of mine, right? Just bog standard dude going about his life. But he knows this other, like literally a royal, an international royal, and a buddy of mine who never ventures farther than a beach trip to New Jersey, ended up in Dubai, right, for like a week or two. It was incredible, like staying with a prince, essentially a prince. Sometimes the die is rolled, and when we see it, we need to realize the dice is rolled. I'm in a space that was never planned, right? And when we're crafting the story of our lives, we write structure. The people around us change the story. And the math rocks, right? What are the math rocks? For me, I know what the math rocks are. God above was like, you spend the day in Phoenixville above, I'm a Christian. I'm not asking you to realize that, but I am telling you there are math rocks in your life, right? You don't understand it's God, but I can tell you right now, you don't control everything in your life. You're going to get hit by the math rocks. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. As Dungeon Masters and as Dungeons and Dragons players, it's very important that we recognize when we are in that space that was created by the math rocks. That's my humble opinion. I'm ready to hear yours. I'm eager to hear yours. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful morning.